often through good decisions you can better management practices, do things that are socially better, environmentally better, that will increase revenues, decrease costs, and will lead to shareholder performance. But life isn't ideal, and I don't think that's always going to be the case, and at least in the short term there may be decisions that a board and a management team takes that they think are the right decisions for what it is that they stand for from taking a long-term perspective, that may have negative consequences for shareholders. For example, they may decide that they want to pay a living wage rather than a market wage. And over time, that could actually turn out to be beneficial for shareholders. You'll get better people, keep them, they'll be more motivated, and rather kind of obvious arguments, but in the short term, they have consequences, and I think they just need to be candid about that. So one thing integrated reporting does is kind of raise, I think, a more fundamental question. If we care about a sustainable society and we care about a sustainable planet, it raises a more fundamental question about the role of business in society. If you truly have, as I said, a sustainable strategy as a corporation, then the best way to communicate that is through integrated reporting. At the same time, a commitment to integrated reporting changes one's mental frame. And it starts to get you to think about the world in a different way, and it starts to lead you down a path of making sure that you have a more sustainable strategy, because it will force better internal integration, it will force information sharing, it will force a clear understanding of what the cause and effect relationships are between financial and non-financial performance, which still today is the $64,000 question. One of the challenges in understanding those is really a data challenge, with probably the single biggest barrier being the lack of standards on non-financial information, so that you've got the same kind of apples to apples comparison that you do with financial information. That's one of the areas where I think the work of the International Integrated Reporting Committee is very important, and ultimately, whether it's through expanding the mandate of the ISB or some other mechanism, we need to have a global consensus that's politically and socially legitimate set of standards for non-financial information, the same way we have for financial information. And by the way, we can't take as long to get to those standards and have them be global standards and not country-based standards as happened with financial information, because the planet doesn't have that long. When Ernst at the conference in Amsterdam said by 2020, Mervyn in some of his remarks said, well, maybe it should be more like 2015. I mean, we need to get on with it, and that's why the International Integrated Reporting Committee was formed with some sense of urgency. Maybe the last point to make is one report doesn't only mean one report. Common objection we get is, well, gee, there's important information. There's two objections that we get. One is, gee, if it's one report, it's going to be 1,000 pages long, and who's going to be able to find all the information? And that's certainly not the intention. And there's technologies like this XBRL that can make that easier. One report as a document can be 40, 50 pages. It's the really material, critical financial and non-financial information that management thinks is important in running the business, that investors and other stakeholders care about. The really critical performance information, set standards around materiality and the relationships between the two. It by no means precludes and prevents companies from providing much more detailed information, whether it's on financial performance, whether it's on social performance, whether it's on economic performance that is of particular interest to other stakeholder groups. In fact, we think that that's a good thing to do, which is where the internet comes in. When you talk about reporting, when people talk about reporting in the current context, certainly people in my generation, what is invoked in their mind is a paper document, PDF, or something that's put out in the mail. What you see in the companies that are practicing integrated reporting today is that the paper document really is the least interesting and least important part. It's a symbolic representation, but the true communication is taking place over the internet, and it's numbers, and it's narrative, and it's videos, and it's pictures, and it's not only reporting, but it is engaging. So when we think about reporting, what we really mean is both reporting and listening. So it's talking, but it's listening, it's dialogue and engagement, and it's using the internet, it's using social media, it's engaging, having a collective conversation, providing not only data, providing analytical tools so that people can analyze the data on their own. SAP does some of that on their corporate social responsibility website. It is enabling people to take the data that the company is reporting with data of their own, analytical tools being provided by the company, analytical tools that people have on their own communities, sharing these analytical tools, and ultimately creating a collective conversation around the company's performance across all stakeholder groups. Natura is actually, and we write about it in our book, is moving in that direction. It has interesting implications not only for companies, because for companies to practice integrated reporting, they need to take a longer term view, they need to take a more integrated view, they need to think about performance across the different dimensions, and they need to recognize where trade-offs exist. Same thing is true of the users of this information, all of the company's different stakeholders. So shareholders need to recognize that there's stakeholders who have legitimate interests, and there may be some conflicts in the short term. But stakeholders in the NGO community, they need to recognize the necessity of companies to produce economic value for shareholders, and they need to recognize that they can't optimize what the demands are of any particular stakeholder group. And the way I like to think about it is that everybody has to grow up. Everybody has to recognize that we're all in this together, and this group has legitimate concerns around, an environmental issue that could have to do with, biodiversity, and another group on carbon emissions, and another group on the impact on communities, and another group on diversity. All legitimate. But companies need to make resource allocation decisions, and you can't optimize things for everybody. And I think a great advantage of integrated reporting, when you think about it as not just a paper document, but you think about it as leveraging the internet to create this collective conversation, is it's the way, starting with companies, but then more generally, we get a social consensus on what the expectations are on the part of the company, how well the company is meeting those expectations. That information is communicated in its reporting. It gets feedback from its stakeholders on the performance and on the quality of the reporting that it's doing. And I think it all takes us down a positive path.